FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. Today is 11/10/2020. Well, COVID, the pandemic, has taken its toll on various parts of the economy, of the workforce. So many areas have been hit, but one perhaps you're not thinking of, we're going to cover shortly, and that is the effect of women in the workplace, both entrepreneurs and employees. You know, when you think about what happened, schools being closed and people having to literally spend months on end with their children, even if they could go to work, if your office was open, you couldn't go because you couldn't leave your kids. And then your children are busy learning, distance learning, web-based learning, and we know that has problems. So all these things are really conspiring to really set women back. Hey, what's your story? How have you handled it? We'd love to know. Send us an email to kl@kerrylutz.com. And our guest right now is Arwen Becker, owner of Becker Retirement and author of a new book, She Handled It, which maybe is really apropos of this moment in time, Arwen. So just to describe to us the impact it's had on female careers and male careers as well, but particularly females with everything going on in the home during the pandemic.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Kerry. And you know what? You couldn't be more right. I mean, so if you look back before the pandemic, women on average spent 15% of their working years out of the workforce caring for children or caring for ailing family members. So if that's what it was during the good times, when we didn't have kids going to school remotely and losing positions because of that, because of COVID, there was already a pretty significant difference between women at 15% of their working years out of the workforce because of care versus men spending only 1.6% of their years out of the workforce. So because of COVID hitting and with the amount of remote learning that's still occurring across the nation, we have predominantly women who are bearing the weight of being at home and either attempting to work, which doesn't really work that well, especially if you have elementary school age children. And so it's just, there's a huge compound effect that we're seeing, because not only are women bearing the weight of then having to go and either try to work from home or trying to do this delicate dance between caring for their kids, but then still being able to make a living, be able to put into their retirement, all these different pieces. And so we're seeing that women are being set back what could be more than a decade or more because of the fact that they're bearing the vast majority of the weight as it relates to caregiving during this time of, just unprecedented COVID. I mean, it's crazy.
It's not just the children here, Arwen. It's also elderly family members.
Yep.
Where, women are naturally caregivers. I mean, that's just the way it is. And of course, when a disaster hits in the family, a woman's probably going to be called on to handle it, to assist, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. So when you have elderly parents and you're worried that they're in the COVID vulnerable class, then who else is coming to the rescue here?
Sure. Yeah, exactly. I mean, women are way more likely to take care of their ailing parents than their brothers are. And MIT did a study years ago that they said that if you're fortunate enough to have a daughter, if you're fortunate enough to have more than one, but your firstborn daughter is worth about $1.5 million to you, because the sacrifice of time, energy, that she will make most likely to be able to care for one or both parents And that's really significant. And they found that it wasn't the sons that then stepped in. If you didn't have a daughter, it was actually the daughter-in-law who tended to do that. And so, as we look at the financial aspect of it, so if you are either losing your job because of COVID, or you're trying to work from home and manage your children, we're going to continue to see this, the gender wage gap increase because the experience is going down. You're spending so much more time trying to do this dance between keeping your kids on track, which women then feel guilty because they feel like they're failing them there. And then yet they can't seem to do all the things that they know that they need or want to do for their work. And so then they're feeling guilty about that. So you have actually other pieces, the emotional, the shame and the guilt and all the things that a lot of us as women feel if we feel like we can't do a job adequately and we're failing people. And so we're dealing with a lot of other issues, not just the financial issue, which are going to continue to perpetuate down the road.
Yeah, so we always like to talk about solutions here, Arwen, but what is the solution? I mean, for men to chip in more, it's kind of natural roles here. Women are caregivers, or, not to say men can't do it. I know I have lots of friends male friends who take care of their elderly parents because there's basically nobody else left to do it. But we got to have some type of plan for this. If nothing else, it shows that, in these situations, it could happen again, could be a second wave. Probably need to have a plan for this in place, don't we?
Right. I believe education is paramount. And, I'll be the first one to raise my hand as a woman to say I kind of left it for other people to handle for a lot of years. And I talk about that a lot in my book. She handled it, so can you. And the she isn't necessarily me. It's also watching my mom, raising two daughters and being a lunch lady and hand making clothes and all the things that she did to sacrifice for us as well. But getting educated. I mean, if you happen to be spending a little more time at home, and maybe you've lost your job or you're working less hours, don't just fill that time with Netflix and everything else. I know we want to do it, but finding some time, carving out some time to actually pick up books that are going to educate you in the area of finance. What is it that are the basics that I could be doing now that are going to set forth a greater success 10 years from now? Because we're going to be 10 years older 10 years from now, one way or another. So we might as well have the education, because I've seen women do it who have started from less than zero. And 10 years later, it's amazing what they've been able to accomplish. So getting educated is a piece of that. You mentioned, as it relates to, couples, if you are married, you have to dialogue with your spouse. I mean, that's been one of those pieces that my husband and I have had a pretty solid division of duties as it relates to who handles watching over our children with homework and talking to the school. And that's predominantly been my role. But it's required more help from him because there's been this greater burden that's been put on me to manage them while they're at home. And so he's picked up the slack, doing more of the grocery shopping and doing more of those things that maybe don't necessarily require interface on homework and things of that nature, but he's picking up slack in other areas, doing laundry, helping out with grocery shopping, and doing some of those pieces. And so I think it just requires conversation between spouses and being willing to say, hey, I'm drowning under this. Yeah, I'm trying to work from home. It may seem like I can get a lot done, but unless you've actually spent a day at home with children trying to do online schooling, it's so hard. It's so hard to get anything done. So you've got to talk about it.
Yeah, well, there's always the option of installing a padded cell in your house apartment. If you have enough room, that is, and I guess you could convert a closet, right?
Yeah, sure. Of course you could.
Yeah, well, so lessons learned here, right? How do you see your role changing here in the future? What are you going to do to make, if this happens again? Because look, if it happened once, Arwen, it could happen again, right?
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
With multi-million ounce potential at its Yellowknife District project, Gold Terra is a company on the move. You'll find them at goldterracorp.com, and their ticker on the OTC is TRXXF. On the TSX, it's YGT. The management team is headed up by near legend Gerald Hanaton of Detour Gold fame, who's convinced that Yellowknife's potential is far greater than its current 735,000 ounce resource. The mine benefits from great infrastructure. Employees can pick up breakfast at Tim Hortons on the way to work. And there's multiple high-grade discoveries, putting Gold Terra on track to reestablishing Yellowknife as one of the premier gold mining districts in Canada. And that should do wonders for the stock price as well. So head on over to goldterracorp.com and sign up for their notifications now.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Right, and this is just an unusual circumstance, but there's circumstances that are similar to this that are going to have a similar effect financially on you. And so if I look back to where my husband and I were 10 years ago, we were drowning. And I talk about this in my book. I mean, entrepreneurs, financial company, going through the Great Recession, having our house foreclosed on, and how devastating it was. I felt like the worst failure in the world because I couldn't hold it all together, and yet had to give up what meant so much to me and really does mean a lot to a lot of women, my personal residence, which is where my youngest son was born, literally at home. So for me now, looking 10 years later, yeah, we didn't expect COVID itself, but when I look at the preparation we did as entrepreneurs, as husband and wife, and the changes that we made in that 10-year time period is astronomical. We kept everybody employed. We flourished during this time. We're still on record pace for our goals that we set in January. We bought our dream home during COVID. So you have all these things. I have an 815 credit score. That doesn't happen because of an accident. It happened because we started putting in the education and really figuring out what were some of the systemic issues that we had from, money in our youth and, all of these different pieces, and doing the work, reading, talking, fighting our way through it, and finding ourselves on the other side, thankful that we did.
Hey, and I've always believed that you rise to any challenge that life throws your way. And this is no different. Yeah, it is different because you haven't encountered anything like this in your life before. I certainly have. But sure. Life goes on. Life waits for no man or woman, and you either adapt to it or you perish. But think of all the people who are unable to adapt.
Yeah, and that the adaptability, and a lot of people use the term pivoting. I mean, all of those things are necessary, but my husband and I both very much set our intention at the beginning of this when we had no idea how this was going to affect financial markets. We had no idea how it was going to affect our company and our employees and all of the pieces going along with that. But one of the things we did is we set our intention that we were going to be a couple who rose to the occasion. We were going to be a company that was able to continue to prosper, whatever that looked like. Because, speaking for me personally, I went from giving events, 30 a year, to 0. I have not given a women's event seminar since February. That was 80% of our leads that came into our company. And so it's not as though we just kind of were like, oh, things were fine. We just had this big, huge pile of cash. No, we didn't. We had a healthy company and we were debt free, but we had to go, wait a second, how are we going to pivot and change as a company and still be able to, meet with new people? What does that even look like when we're used to meeting face to face? So you have to be willing to go, what is something I can do? Anything. Start looking outside the box, thinking differently, and you become much more resilient when you do.
Hey, and the cliche is more appropriate now, more apropos now than ever before. The only constant in life is change, right?
Yes, indeed.
Just when you think maybe things are calming down, stabilizing, they change some more. And there's nothing new about this. This has happened throughout history. So maybe a little reference to historical events, consequences really is appropriate here. Remember, they had the Spanish flu in 1918. We've had the Hong Kong flu. We've had a lot. And maybe the worst part of this pandemic was the actual reaction to it of shutting down the global economy rather than making a data-driven approach, which certainly I don't think took place. But not to get political about it, but just that these crazy mistakes, accidents of fate are the norm. And in the US, we've been so stable for so many years, just having the same currency unit for over 200 years, a dollar printed up in 1789 is still good in any store. Not that you'd want to use it for that because stability, but the seduction of stability makes you think that these things don't happen here, like major hurricanes and earthquakes and everything else. They do happen, but maybe we've had this illusion, this aura of stability, and maybe that's a negative for personal growth as well.
I think it is. And, I actually talked with my counselor not too long ago, and he gave such a great example of this, that he said, life really is, it's a lot like getting on a train and you're heading to this destination, and yet you continue going and you're like, well, when am I going to get there? I mean, I'm so excited about getting there. And there's all this anticipation about arriving at the destination, yet in life, you never arrive at that destination. And yet you forget on the train are all the things that you love. Your family's there, you're getting to do, enjoy great food, or you're getting to do great things along the way. Yet we get so tied up in getting there, and the getting there just never occurs. And so you're gonna have stops along the way, but they're not heaven. There's gonna be issues there. It's either people, it's either health, it's financial, it's kids, it's marriage, it's any of those pieces. And yet we have to remember, just like you said, what have we seen historically? And then look back in your own personal life too, and just say, gosh, I made it through that, whatever that was. Maybe it was a really difficult time in high school or in your early 20s, or maybe in your 50s, you lost a job and yet you got a new vocation and you learned a new skill and you ended up doing something great. And yet we forget that sometimes, that there's always going to be something else. Always. This just happens to be something we can all relate to, which is kind of good and bad. Yes.
Hey, they used to, Gilda Radner's character on Saturday Night Live was famous Rosanna Dana, I think it was. And she used to say, there's always something, right? And there's always something. That's what you have to remember. And being ready for the inevitable, or for, you could not have prepared for a pandemic other than if you were like a prepper, but nobody knew what was going to happen here with the pandemic. Yeah, in theory, we were bound to have a pandemic, and the public health officials have been telling us for 20, 30 years. The reality is they tell us, and until it happens, you don't believe it.
Right.
That's
right. It's just like us in the Seattle area being told about the big earthquake. that at some point will happen, but it hasn't. And so you kind of don't take it seriously. And rightfully so. I mean, I think a lot of us don't want to live in that place of, over preparing, fear-based, oh gosh, if it could happen. And then we miss so much of the life along the way. But there is a lot of personal responsibility that my husband and I look at and recognize as to why we're prepared now versus what we looked like as a company and as a husband and wife 10 years ago, and as a family unit. It's very different because of the amount of work that we put in the last 10 years to be prepared for the unknown.
Hey, well, here's the thing. You can never over prepare, but you can obsessively over prepare.
Sure.
You got to live in the present.
Right.
And that is the key. Any guru, any life coach, everyone will tell you, if you don't live in the present, you are going to be miserable, because you're either going to be worrying about what happened in the past, or you're going to be worrying about what happened in the future. But just because you're living in the present doesn't mean you don't buy car insurance, because right now you're not in an accident. Doesn't mean you don't buy life insurance and health insurance and fire insurance, all of that. So some amount of preparation is required. Well, maybe we can do a show on that next time, Arwen. It's been really great having you on. Just tell us, where do we find you? How do we connect with you and what you can do for us?
Yeah, a few different ways. So my company, beckerretirement.com. So you can reach myself and all of our team of advisors there. We really focus on people who are about 5 to 10 years out from retirement or already retired, keeping them retired and happy and doing the things that they want to do. And then on Amazon, my book, She Handled It, So Can You, an inspiring and empowering financial guide for women. And it's really based in stories. So a lot of the events that I do, that's how I teach. So a lot of women really prefer learning that way versus a lot of spreadsheets and data. So I would definitely recommend that if you need a little bit of a kickstart of inspiration to get some things handled in your own finances. And then my podcast, She Handled It. That's where I actually interview women who've overcome really significant adversity and what they learned throughout that process. And that's found on all platforms as well.
All right. Excellent. And there's a link in the show notes to your website. Any questions or comments, please email us kl@kerrylutz.com, Twitter feed @KerryLutz, our main site, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Send us your emails, sign up for our free newsletter. Arwen, always great talking with you. We will talk to you again real soon. Good luck.
Thank you.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.